error messaging and error handling in SQL Server. Just kind of quickly go over what we're going to show in the scripts. Just going to go through the PowerPoints first. Error messages, I'm sure we've all seen them. They occur when you're trying to create an object that already exists, or drop something that doesn't exist, or break a foreign key somewhere, try to insert data or update data or clear it out, and that violates a foreign key or violates a primary key if you're duplicating stuff. If you try to exceed your permissions, if your database user does not have execute permissions and you try to do it, then you'll get an error message. And then there's also kind of lower level stuff. If you're trying to do a print in a scalar function, it'll be like, oh, we can't do these side effecting functions. The basic layout of an error message, it says a message number on the front, and then it says there's a state associated with it, and there's also a severity. The severities 1 through 10 are just really informational. They're presented in red or black text, so they don't look very scary. Severities 11 through 16 are red. Those are more serious errors, but they can be fixed by the user. So if you're violating a primary key or calling something that you don't have permissions for, it'll be in the 11 through 16 range of severity. Range 17 through 19, those are worse. Those are kind of getting into the SQL Server level, hardware level. And then 20 through 25 are very, very bad. You have to get like an admin to work on those. That's not like a scripting fix. So you can also create or call or raise custom error messages. If you want to raise an error that's in the higher severity, so 17 or higher, you need to be a sysadmin or have permissions to alter trace, and you need to use the with log function, so it'll show up in the error log. You can have parameters, pass in parameters to the error message, and kind of have there's a little regular expression which we'll go over that can return different things dynamically in the error message. And you can also use SQL Profiler to look for certain message numbers. So you could you could put in custom error messages all over and look for those message numbers. You could also use the state property on those error messages and look for specific states given the certain message number, if you're trying to troubleshoot that way. So error handling, depending on what the error is, there's different levels of kind of statement abortion given the errors. So there's statement termination, which means it will, if you do say 3 inserts, the middle one blows up, it can continue on to the next one. Or if you have a list of stored procedures you're calling, one of them could blow up, but then it would continue on to the next one. If it's the scope abortion, it will exit that stored procedure and run the next one. Batch abortion, which will just stop everything that you've currently triggered running. Connection termination, which is really bad. That's when the severity is usually greater than 20. That one will disconnect the client and roll back any open transactions. There's the XACT abort, which stands for transaction abort. And if it's on, by default it's off, but when it's on, if there's any errors encountered in a transaction, it will exit the transaction and roll back anything. You don't need to have a kind of a try catch and then a rollback transaction in the catch. If this happens, if you have transaction abort on and there are errors with severity 11 through 16, that will trigger a batch abortion, which will stop everything is currently running. More error handling, the try-catch. We'll go over the try-catch syntax. You have a begin try, and an end try, and you have all your statements in there, and then a begin catch, which will get ran if there's any errors that encountered. And in the begin catch section, you have access to properties around what the error message is, like the message, the number, the severity, even the procedure if it was run inside of a procedure. Okay, on to the demo. We'll drop and create our database here with one table. We won't build the table. We're going to create the inventory table. So this first statement here is a create table, and we can see we get an error message. So message 2714, level 16, state 6, line 40 refers to your the current scope of it. So that changes all the time. But the message says there's already an object named inventory in the database. We've probably seen that before. Create table. And it says incorrect syntax in your inventory. Okay. That message number is 102, level 15, state 1. We can try dropping a table that doesn't exist. And that message is 3701, level 7. So you can kind of see that there's a kind of a lot to an error message, or more than just the text that you get back. And then this is the syntax for the simple syntax for creating a custom error message. By default, if you don't specify a message number, the message number is 50,000 for any raise errors that you do. One thing to note is it's not raise error, it's raise error with one E.
Oh, yeah.
Not sure why that's there, but that's the syntax. And you can see that I set the level to the severity to 16. So we'll do level of severity 1 through 10 here. The first ones, we'll run those, and we can see that they're red text. They're black text. They're not the red text. But when we run the raise errors with severity 11 and 18, now the text is red. So there's a difference between kind of the presentation on informational errors and errors. So we can create or raise custom errors with the level of or severity of 19, which is getting into the more serious ones. And when you do that, I'm logged in as a sysadmin, but it won't let me run this. It says errors with severity levels greater than 18 can only be specified by members of the sysadmin role, which I am, and it says using the with log action. So when you run it with the with log, then it looks just like the other lesser severity raise errors. But it actually stores that error message that it occurred. All right, so now let's create a function, test print, returns an int, and we have a print inside of it and a raise error. And oh, you can't do that. We've tried the print before, and you get the invalid use of side effecting operator print within a function. Raise error is treated the same, and you can't have a raise error inside of a function as well. So it's not a way to get around the inability to have print, if that's how you're going to troubleshoot a function. All right. So some people have asked, well, what's the difference between print and raise error if you're troubleshooting to kind of display out to the messages tab, what's going on. So The first little test here is a while loop with the print counter, and we do a delay. So we'll run it and look at the messages output. And we'll just kind of wait, and it waits to display the print messages until the entire batch is done. So we'll run the same loop here. One thing with the raise error is you can't do text concatenation inside of there. So you need to do text concatenation outside of it, assigning it to filling that text into a variable and using that variable in the raise error. But we use the raise error with no wait, and we have the same delay. Now we'll run this set again, look at the messages. You can see that it puts it out to the messages buffer as it's encountered. It doesn't wait until the very end to display the message. So it's very handy if you're trying to troubleshoot something that is running way too long and it's got multiple steps involved. You can use the raise error with no wait to kind of see where things are occurring.
So there's no way to flush the cache with the print?
No. The question was, there's no way. Is there a way to get it to spit out the prints before the end of the batch? No, you need to use raise error to get it real time. Except when you do a raise error with a severity of 17 or 18. It's the same loop as before, but we set the severity to 17 here. We'll run that, and that one goes into a different buffer pool and actually waits until the end to do the output. So when you're trying to use raise error to kind of debug things or follow things through in real time, use it with a lower severity, like a, I don't know, 1, just for informational. All right, so earlier I mentioned you can use parameters and regular expressions in custom error messaging. So in this little do while loop here, it's going to put the counter value while it does the loop into the text. And yeah, there's, you could just append the counter on there, but if there's some other values that kind of are at system level or other way, this is how you can do it. When you put in the parameter text there, there's a %s, and that stands for string. If you're going to do an assigned integer, you would do a D or an I, or an unsigned integer, you would do a U. Here's the kind of the key for that. And you can put in multiple parameters, comma separated at the end there. So we'll run this. You can see that it is dynamically changing the string based on the parameterization. All right, so custom error message numbers. In the sys messages table, it stores all of the, we gotta let that one finish. It stores all of those, like, table X does not exist. Those types of messages in the sys messages table. And we can see that there's 252,000 rows in this table here. It's all variety of languages and severities. So kind of the US English is in the language 1033. So we've got 11,462 error messages that will be returned. And they've put in, you can see here, the parameterization, %D for date, or %S for string. So when you want to raise a specific error, you just put in the message number instead of a custom text. And so for this error message 21337, it's a state 1 level 1, which I defined. But the message is invalid, subscriber value, valid options are local and global. So if in your process you want to raise a specific error message, that's how you can call it. If you put in kind of the procedure name here, the text afterwards treats it as you can kind of spoof an error message coming from an object. So this error message says invalid parameter or option was specified for the procedure custom sprock name, which is that sprock doesn't exist. I just did the text and passed it in.
The existing one shows that.
So the procedure, that's not true. I'm specifically telling the server to return with that name. Little raise error is message number 1200, and it says the error number is 1200. The number I'm trying to raise must be between 13,000 and the max int number, and it cannot be 50,000 because 50,000 is reserved for custom error messages. If I just put text in there, replace the 1200 with a string of text, then the error message number would be 50,000. So if you're trying to raise 50,000, that doesn't make sense because there is no error message text associated with 50,000. Any questions?
Do you use this for debugging scripts?
Which ones do I use this for debugging scripts? And I haven't in a long time, but the raise error is handy if you want to see stuff that's happening real time. I don't write any logic around, custom error messages so far.
What would happen if you left that in a PHP, like something that's a process?
So
The
question is, what would happen if it was left in, production code? And it would be like, well, that depends on, if it's in transaction, it would throw the, if it was in a try catch, it would generate an error there. Could cause, depending on the error message level, it could cause, a batch abort, or even a transaction abort, batch abort, or connection termination.
But if it was like just in the low severity level,
If it was just informational,
if it was informational, that wouldn't impact the results that got returned anyway, right?
Depends on how things are wrapped.
I just was curious if you. Okay.
So what do you use it for? Use it for validation or something? Or
I can use it for keeping track. If there's some business logic that occurs that's not enforced with foreign keys and stuff, then you can actually have the system throw an error, and then you can kind of track that error and write business logic around that custom error. So log it off to this database and follow this other course of logic or something. In development, it can be handy to kind of have them at a low level, and if you can't step through the code very well. So the next section is transaction abort, the x_abort. By default, it's turned off. So this is how you can turn it on or turn it off. The set abort on or set it off. So in this case, we're going to insert into the inventory table 3 times. The middle insert statement has a null. This table has a not null constraint on the here. So the first statement would work, the second one would not work, and the third one would work. So we'll run this, and it's in a transaction. The transaction abort is off. So our results show that we inserted the first one and the third one, but not the middle one. Category 3 and a category 4, but we didn't insert this null category. So let's empty out the table and run it again, but set the transaction abort on. Same data, 3, a null, and a 4. We'll run it. It says one row affected, cannot insert null into column. This column does not allow null. Insert fails. So now let's run that select from the inventory table, and there's nothing in there. So it shows that in this, since the transaction abort was on, it entered a transaction, it did an insert, but then it encountered a null and it rolled the entire transaction back. So neither the first or the last insert statement occurred. Oops.
How would you handle that though if you want to keep going? Like you just hit with that on? Can you do that without on? Or you have to turn that off?
Well, if you wanted to, in your transaction, continue on, if you encountered an error like that, which I don't know, if that's a good idea or not, you could have the transaction abort off, and you can see that we rerun that transaction, and this is the insert that will fail. So you see we get an error message back in the buffer, or in the message window, and the results are from this last insert. It actually inserted the first one and the last one.
That's default behavior.
Yeah, and this is default behavior on the SQL server.
So that was a level 16 message. Are those going to be on?
So a question was, that was a level 16 message, and are those going to be logged? And
So that you can run that way and later go back and fix the ones that.
I'm not sure if they're automatically logged. The logging thing was around raising or forcing an error message of 17 or 18 required the use of a with log. And the higher ones too, like the level 20 through 25 might require the with log too. So does that answer your question, James? Okay. So yes, that is default behavior to continue on in a transaction even when it encounters an error. We'll turn that off for future. All right, so try catch is a way to exit a block of code if any errors occur and perform a different set of logic if an error has occurred, and you also have access to the error information that occurred in the try catch. So the syntax is begin try, end try, and then a begin catch, an end catch. So in this sample, we'll do a raise error. We're just going to do a first error message, severity 15, state 3 in some store procedure. And then in the catch block, we'll do a select add error, which only returns the error message number. In this case, it would be 50,000, the custom error. And then we will select the properties associated with the error number, severity, state, procedure, line, and message. So run that. Since an error occurred in the catch, we can see that here's the select add error. Not very useful. I mean, if you know all your error message numbers by heart, then it can be useful if you're just going to log that. I mean, I guess you could log that number and later join it to the sys error message table. Then there's also the second select row set contains each of the properties: error number 50,000, severity 15, state of 3, which was declared up here. The error procedure, since it really wasn't a procedure, that property was not set. Error line 3 just depends on how many rows I've selected when I'm executing this. And the error message, which is a custom error message. All right, so now we're going to use try catch to roll back transactions. So in this sample, same begin try, end try, and begin catch, end catch. In the try section, we have a transaction, so begin tran and a commit tran. We're going to do our insert again with one of them having a null in the category, which is a non-null field. So that should trigger the catch section, which will do a rollback. And then we'll select out the error message, and we will select start from inventory to see if anything was actually inserted. So we run that. The first result set is our error property. Error messages cannot insert null into the column category ID. Insert fails, and we can see that nothing was actually inserted because at this point in the code, anything that was that happened in the begin tran has been rolled back. So we've got nothing in our table, values in there. So now this statement will work. It will insert values into the table. So we ran that a few times. We can see here that the highest inventory ID, which is an identity value, is 29. So now let's put this back to null and run it a few times. We'll run that a few times. And then, so no more values have been inserted into the table. So now let's put this value back. So it will insert more rows into the table. And select from our table again. And we can see here that here's the 29 record, and the next ID is 48. So even though you do a begin tran, or try catch, and you're rolling your transaction back, just like any identity field insert, it's actually incrementing that insert, that identity ID, even though it's rolled back. So that's just kind of one thing to be aware of, that yes, something did happen, and that you could have gaps in your identity field. Any questions on that? No? All right, on to the throw. So throw is another command to raise the error or show an error that has occurred. So throw, you can see message 5,000 to 70,000. You can throw custom error messages. It's kind of an oddball thing. I've never used it. It must be greater than or equal to 50,000 and less than the integer maximum.
It doesn't actually put that message though. 7,000.
Yeah,
There's no message.
yeah. So yes, it displays whatever text you have in there with a custom number that you entered. So let's delete the inventory table. So we're going to use throw on this one in a try catch. So in the catch, we don't display the error at all. We just roll back the transaction. So 0 rows affected. Because an error was encountered in this insert statement. To begin, try, end try, begin catch, end catch. And in the try statement, we're using a begin tran, commit tran. One of the insert statements has a null category ID, so it will, display that error message. But in the catch, we only have rollback tran. So let's the throw right there. So before the rollback tran, we're going to throw the error. Oh, and it says the error message that happened. You know, we can't insert null into the category ID. So if we have the throw after the rollback tran, it says cannot roll back the throw, no transaction or save point of that name is found. So if you want to use throws in your catch and a rollback transaction, you have to be aware of the order that you are actually calling these operations, because if you have the throw after the rollback tran, that error information is lost.
Cannot roll back throw. Is it using like the name throw for transaction or something? Not roll back throw.
Yeah.
The exception state's saved in the transaction.
Yeah, so yeah, the exception error message is lost at that point. So throw is kind of a,
the context is lost because of the rollback. Had the errors as well as the work it undid.
Change state.
yeah, so it's kind of a, yeah, depending on how you use it, you might, you know, be causing bugs or.
But then you leak a transaction by putting the throw in front of the rollback.
That's what I was thinking.
Depends on the exact abort thing, right?
Yeah. So throw is something you can use, but there's a lot of nuances
It's
around
interesting
it.
too that the scope of the transaction, which is natural in a SQL thing, exceeds the scope of the try.
Mm-hmm.
After our discussion the other day about the try catch thing, right?
That's in PHP, but
Mhm.
right, yeah.
Mhm.
It's the-
Just programming languages wouldn't have transaction kind of scope that way.
So nesting try catches. In this example, we have a begin try. We have an outer try catch. And then in the outer try, we have another try catch. And within that one, we have a begin tran, commit tran with an insert statement that will blow up because we're trying to insert null into a non-nullable field. And within the catches, there's a print inner catch and a print outer catch. So we can use this to kind of view how things go. So it's bigger. Well, anyway, so in this case, there's no throw. So we only see the inner catch message printed out, because even though an error occurred in the try of the outer try catch, that error was caught with the inner try catch. So there was no error seen at the outer try catch level. So that's why we don't see a print outer catch. But if we have a throw here, we have the inner catch throw an error and kind of pass it out to the outer catch level. You can see the inner catch get printed out, and then this throw from the inner catch is passed out to the outer try, which the outer try catch catches. We can see that the print outer catch was caught or ran. And then we use the throw and we can see the actual error message from the inner try catch, which is passed out, which is a cannot insert null into the category ID field. So you can nest try catches, but you have to be aware that if you catch an error at a lower level, and if you don't pass that error along to the outer try catch, there's no kind of error seen at that level. So is there any questions around that? Does that make sense?
Can we do a try catching function?
Function.
Yeah. All right. So any other questions? That's it for today, so.
In my experience, having this in try catches, it's really nasty up there.
In SQL?
Yeah.
Depending on language.
In SQL,
Looks
just with all the rollbacks and